I remember the first time I wandered that frozen forest, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and refuses to leave. Fog hung low between skeletal trees, soft and white, almost hiding the snow beneath it. The light was pale, the sun a distant memory, and my breath rose in slow, visible clouds that vanished before they even seemed real. Everything was still, too still, except for the faint, uneven crunch of snow under my boots. I felt a presence, though I couldn't see it. Static whispered through the air, a low hum vibrating in my chest, and I told myself it was just the wind. But then I heard the branches snap, not far off. Deliberate, too deliberate. Shadows moved against the fog like they had purpose, and I froze, heart thudding, waiting. That's when I saw it. A shape tall and impossible, limbs thin and elongated, staring back with eyes that were nothing but hollow ice. The forest was frozen. Twilight draped over the pines in a pale gray light. Snow lay thick and heavy, softening each step, swallowing it before it could even echo. The air smelled of cold metal and old frost, a sharpness that tickled my nostrils. I breathed it in slowly, feeling it settle in my lungs. Every exhale felt louder than the last, though the snow smothered everything. I thought I heard something first in the distance, a whisper, like silk sliding across my ear, brushing past without touching. It moved with the wind, faint, unsteady, as if uncertain whether it wanted to be heard. I paused, trying to pinpoint its direction. The trees were rigid, dark silhouettes against the fading sky. Branches scraped together with a soft, skeletal rhythm. The whispers came again, closer this time, curling around me like smoke. I could almost make out words, but they dissolved before they reached understanding. Curiosity pulled at me, an invisible thread, tighter with every step. I followed it. My boots sank slightly into the snow, each footfall a muted thud. The cold nipped at my fingers, stiffening them, but I hardly noticed. All my attention was drawn to that low, shifting murmur. A shadow moved, slipping between the trees, too fluid to belong to any creature I knew. It was darker than the night, pooling in the corners of my vision. I blinked and it darted again, always ahead, never lingering. I whispered my own name, almost against my will. The sound seemed alien to me, loud in the frozen hush. And then it stopped. The whispers stopped. The forest held its breath. Silence pressed against my ears. I realized I could hear everything now. The crunch of snow under branches, the faint rustle of pine needles settling. Even the hum of my own blood felt audible, running through my temples like a soft drum. I tried to move, slow, careful steps. My eyes darted from tree to tree, seeking the shadow, the voice, something to anchor me, but nothing moved. Not even the wind. Not even the snow. I felt the cold differently now. It wasn't biting. It was watching. It wrapped around my shoulders, pressed against my cheeks, lingering in my hair. My breath came in short clouds, dissipating into the still air like smoke. A twig cracked behind me. Or maybe it didn't. I spun. Only trees, only snow. Only the way the light seemed to shiver across the trunks. I wanted to leave, but the path seemed gone. Snow covered every trace. The pines leaned closer, their trunks crowded, leaning like figures over a bed. And the whispers, they were gone. I stood there, frozen in more than the cold. My heart beat loud enough to fill the silence. And in that beating, I thought I felt it again. A brush at my ear, a breath against my neck. I did not turn. I could not. The shadow was gone, dissolved into the folds of dusk. Yet the air still trembled as if something lingered just beyond perception. Something small, patient, waiting. I took a step, then another. The snow pressed back underfoot, reluctant, as if reluctant to let me leave. I could feel it watching me, every motion, every shiver. I tried to focus on the sky, fading gray above, quiet, indifferent. It offered nothing, no clues, no answers, and yet I could not shake the feeling that the whispers were still near, humming under the snow, shivering along the branches, curling through the air around me like smoke I could not touch. I walked until the trees thinned, until the forest opened to the bare horizon. The cold eased slightly, but the silence remained heavy, waiting. I stopped at the edge, and for a moment I thought I could hear them again. Soft, careful, under the pines, whispers that did not want to be followed. Whispers that did not want to be understood. I did not turn back. I could not. But I know they are still there, beneath the frozen branches, beneath the snow, beneath the silence. And sometimes, in the quiet of my room, I swear I can still hear them. Snow pressed against my boots as I walked. The trees thinned, and the sky had faded to a pale, tired gray. A single cabin appeared ahead, framed by frost and shadow. A light flickered behind its window. Warm, uneven, inviting in a way that made my chest tighten. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, twisting into the still air like gray fingers. I stepped closer. The snow crunched beneath me, masking something moving behind. A soft rustle, then silence. I paused. My breath fogged the air, rising slowly, mingling with the smoke. It smelled of wood and cold, but something else lingered. Sharp, almost metallic, curling in the back of my throat. The cabin door was wooden and old. It leaned slightly, as though tired of holding its own weight. I reached for the handle, feeling its chill bite through my gloves. Inside, warmth met me immediately. The kind that made your fingers tingle, your chest loosen. But it carried a smell I couldn't name. Rotting maybe, or something sharper like iron and damp cloth. I moved further in. Soft steps on wooden floorboards, hesitant. The pale light from a single lantern flickered across the walls, throwing shadows that leaned too close. The cabin was small. A table in the center, worn, its surface etched with marks that told stories I didn't want to read. A chair tipped slightly as if recently used. I walked to the window. The glass was cold against my palm. Frost-etched patterns on the edges, delicate and cruel. And then I saw it. A reflection. Not just mine. Something stood behind me, silent, motionless. Only a shadow, but it felt alive. Its shape? Wrong. Too tall, too thin, and yet somehow human. I held my breath. The hum of the fire and the subtle creak of the cabin seemed louder than it should have. Every hair on my neck stood. I turned slowly. The room was empty. The chair, the table, the lantern, nothing else. Yet the reflection remained. It did not blink. Did not move. It simply watched. The warmth now felt suffocating. I could feel the air pressing against my skin, heavier with each shallow breath. The smell grew stronger, sharp at the back of my nose, clinging to my hair, my clothes. I wanted to leave, but my feet stayed planted. I felt the snow outside, cold and forgiving, calling me. A creak from the floor behind me, or maybe a shift in the shadows. I dared not turn. I moved instead toward the table. The wood was smooth, worn, cold beneath my fingers. Marks in the grain caught the lantern light, jagged and chaotic. The cabin seemed smaller now. Walls closer, ceiling lower. Even the lantern flickered with unease, as though aware of something unseen. I could hear it then, a whisper. So soft I thought I imagined it. Closer to the fire than the window, curling around the room, brushing against my ear, I froze. The reflection was gone, but I could still feel it behind me. Waiting, patient, I moved to the door. Fingers on the handle, breath shallow. The snow outside whispered beneath my boots, familiar, forgiving. One last look at the cabin. Smoke curling, light flickering. Shadows leaning in, too close to see clearly. I stepped outside. Cold met me like an old friend. The smell faded, leaving only the crisp bite of winter. I didn't look back, but I could feel it. Something still watching through the glass, the cabin at Hollow Creek. Silent now, waiting. And I know it waits for the next. The snow stretched endlessly, pale and hollow under a sky that had gone soft gray. Each step sank slightly, crunching beneath me, but not enough to fill the silence. I could feel it all, the frost pressing against my cheeks, biting at my ears, curling in my hair. Then I saw them. Tracks in the snow. Too long, too wide. Not like a human's. My breath caught, hung in the cold air. I stepped closer. The edges of the prints were crisp, the snow frozen into sharp ridges, untouched by wind or bird. I followed them. Each step I took echoed softly, muted by the snow, but somehow it felt loud, heart-thumping, pressing against my chest, a rhythm I could almost see in the gray light. The tracks led me deeper into the forest. The trees grew closer, their branches clawing at the sky. Snow clung to the bark, pale and sticky, coating everything in white silence. I could hear it then. Not the wind, not my own breath. Something faint, like exhaled air brushing past me, or maybe from somewhere behind. Soft, patient, waiting. I followed the prints. They stretched farther than I could imagine, too perfect, too deliberate. And still, the forest swallowed each sound around me. The path ended at the edge of a cliff. Snow crumbled lightly under my boots, falling into the darkness below. The tracks stopped abruptly, as if whatever had made them had simply vanished into the air. I leaned over, careful. The wind hit me, cold and insistent, and beneath it, I thought I heard a breath. Not mine, it whispered across the ice, curling through the fog like smoke. Soft, deliberate. Almost a voice, but not. I stepped back. The cliff dropped into shadow, endless and quiet. The snow along the edge felt fragile under my weight, brittle like sugar, like glass. I could feel the forest behind me, still, silent, watching. The trees seemed taller here, leaning closer, blocking the light, pressing the gray sky down. The air was thick now, with frost, with the smell of cold earth, and something else. Something sharp, metallic, curling just under my nose. I traced the prints again with my eyes. They didn't return. They didn't curve. They simply ended. And the wind, it carried something faint along with it, a hum, a whisper, a breath I could not place. It seemed to brush against my neck, tickle my hair. I wanted to leave. I wanted the path, the forest, anything to swallow me whole. But I stood there, frozen, drawn by the empty prints, by the sense of something beyond the snow. The cliff didn't fall into darkness. It fell into silence, and the silence had weight. A shiver ran through me, cold and heavy. I could feel my pulse in my ears, thumping like a soft drum, echoing in the still air. The snow pressed against my boots, fragile, waiting. I turned slowly. The forest behind me seemed alive, though nothing moved. Branches shifted with a sigh, shadows stretched along the ground, pale and strange. The tracks had ended, but I could feel their meaning lingering. A presence patient, watching from just beyond the edge. I stepped back from the cliff. Cold wind curling around me, brushing my cheeks, biting at my fingers. The breath, or whatever it had been, dissolved into the fog. I did not look down again, but I could feel it there. Waiting, the forest, the snow, the wind, it held it all. And I knew that the prints, frozen and silent, were not done speaking. I walked away slowly. Each step careful. The snow pressed softly beneath my boots. And in the quiet, I could still hear it. A breath. Faint. Near. The pines loomed taller now, shadows pooling at their roots. Fog drifted low, curling around the trunks like pale fingers. Each breath I took hung heavy, thick, tasting of damp earth and cold pine. A low hum ran through the forest. Not wind, not my own heartbeat. It vibrated beneath my feet, brushing against my ribs, steady and insistent. The fog thickened with every step. It clung to my jacket, whispered along my arms. The smell of wet wood mixed with something metallic, faint but sharp. Shadows moved around me, not with the light. Not like trees sway in the breeze. They stretched and twisted, curling across the snow in impossible angles. I paused. The hum seemed louder, almost speaking. Soft, vibrating through the soles of my boots. I could feel it in my teeth, behind my eyes, under my skin. A branch shifted, or maybe the shadow shifted. It did not fall naturally. It leaned toward me, stretching across the fog, reaching. I took a step back. Soft crunch of snow underfoot, faint against the hum. The fog pressed closer, brushing my face, settling in my hair. Then it came, a howl, distant, drawn, echoing between the trees. It rose, filling the hum with a hollow edge, and then, silence, everything stopped. The fog paused midair. The shadows froze. I could hear my own breath again, loud, uneven. My hands tingled where they brushed the damp needles. The pines seemed still, but the static remained. Low, vibrating just beneath perception. I tried to move, each step slow, deliberate. The shadows twisted with me, reluctant, unwilling to stay still. I could feel them brush my coat, the tip of my sleeve, without a sound. The hum shifted, pulsing in uneven rhythms. It felt like it was listening, waiting for me to choose a direction. I stopped. The fog swirled in tiny spirals at my feet, curling around the snow like smoke. Each tree seemed alive, bending slightly, stretching taller. I realized the forest was breathing with me, or around me. I couldn't tell. A sudden rustle echoed through the undergrowth. Or maybe it was closer. The static vibrated against my ears, filling the space between my heartbeats. I looked up. Shadows stretched from one trunk to another, long, thin, impossibly sharp. They moved independently of the fog, twisting like black ribbons in pale gray. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of wet needles, frost, and something faintly metallic again. It was everywhere, pressing into my chest, curling through my hair, another step forward. The hum changed. It rose, fell, a rhythm that made my stomach clench. I could feel it under the snow, through my boots, threading through the soles of my feet, a soft crack somewhere behind me. Or to the side, I couldn't tell. The shadows trembled slightly, then stiffened. I stopped. Everything waited. Fog, shadows, the pines, the static. The wind shifted. It carried something faint, like a voice, not words, just breath, brushing past my ear. I held my breath. It lingered for a moment, then disappeared, leaving the hum and the stillness. I moved again, slowly, almost floating. The snow pressed softly underfoot, muffled by the fog. Shadows curled in response, leaning closer, watching, but never touching. I walked until the trees thinned. The hum faded, but I could still feel it vibrating under the ground. The fog lifted slightly, light brushing the snow, pale and gray. I paused at the edge. The forest behind me held its breath. Shadows reached just beyond the line of sight, stretching, twisting, patient. And in that quiet, I realized I could still feel it. The static, the breath, the unseen presence in the pines. Waiting, watching. Silent, but alive. I took a slow step forward. The snow pressed beneath me. The fog curled behind me like fingers, and I knew the forest would remember me. The fog lay heavy among the pines. Snow pressed beneath my boots, cold and deep. Every breath rose in a pale cloud, lingering just long enough to fade into silence. Then I saw them, two pale, hollow eyes glowing faintly through the mist, unblinking, watching. I froze. The forest seemed to lean closer as if it too was staring. The hum of distant static from somewhere unseen vibrated through the snow under my feet. I moved carefully. The eyes followed. Every step, every shift, they remained fixed on me, patient, endless. The snow slowed me. It clung to my boots, pulled at my legs, soft yet resisting. Branches scraped my arms as I pushed through, wet frost curling along my sleeves. Every direction looked the same. Tall pines, gray fog, white snow stretching beyond sight. The eyes stayed. Just there, always there, I tried to run. My boots sank with each step, muffling the crunch beneath. The wind rose slightly, carrying a faint metallic scent that made my stomach tighten. They moved with me, or I moved with them. It was impossible to tell. The fog distorted distance, twisting the shadows into impossible shapes. The silence was heavier than the cold. It pressed against my ears, my chest, filling the spaces between heartbeats. Even the softest rustle seemed amplified. I paused. The eyes floated in the fog. Too high, too low, always shifting subtly, never leaving. A branch cracked near my shoulder, or maybe it was snow falling from above. The fog seemed to pulse with each subtle sound, curling closer, tighter, like invisible fingers brushing my skin. I kept moving, slower now, more deliberate. The eyes followed. I could feel them, not just see them. Watching every motion, every shiver, every breath. The trees around me began to bend slightly, leaning inward. Shadows stretched along the snow, joining in the pursuit without leaving footprints. Even the static hum from somewhere distant rose and fell, pulsing with my heartbeat. I tried to focus on the snow beneath me. White, untouched, endless. But the eyes reflected in every patch, in every shadow, impossible to escape. The cold pressed harder now. It curled inside my jacket, wound around my fingers, a sharp, biting presence that made my breath shudder. I could smell frost, pine, and something faintly metallic that clung to the air. I stumbled. Snow crunched beneath me, cold pressing through gloves and coat. The eyes remained, unblinking, patient. I turned. Every angle was the same. The fog, the pines, the snow. And them? I whispered my own name. It sounded foreign, loud in the muted forest. The eyes blinked, or maybe they didn't. The fog shifted, moving around them, but they stayed. I moved again, stepping lightly, carefully, almost floating through the snow. The forest seemed to breathe with me. The fog curled at my ankles, twisted along branches, reaching toward me like quiet hands. The eyes were closer now, or maybe I was farther. Impossible to measure distance in the fog, impossible to escape what watched. I could feel a static hum beneath my feet, rising and falling with my heartbeat. It pulsed through my bones, vibrating in rhythm with the forest itself. And then silence. The fog paused. The snow seemed to freeze mid-crunch. Even the eyes seemed to hover, waiting. I stopped. The forest leaned around me. Cold pressed into my hair, my neck, my cheeks. And in the white-gray stillness, I felt it. The eyes would not leave. I could not leave. The fog, the snow, the pines, they all waited with them, I whispered once more. No answer came. Only the hollow gaze watching patient. And I realized I was utterly alone. I stepped forward. The snow pressed beneath me, cold and endless. The eyes followed. And I knew they always would. I woke to the cold pressing against my face. The snow lay heavy, untouched, muffling the forest into a soft, unbroken silence. Every breath I took hung in the air, sharp and visible. Then I noticed. It froze. Mid-air. Crystals forming before my eyes, tiny shards of white hanging like a frozen whisper. The forest was quiet, impossibly still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my chest, a slow, steady drum in the frozen hush. Shadows moved at the edge of my vision. Small shifts, subtle, almost imagined. I thought I caught them stretching, bending toward me. But each time I turned, nothing was there. The cold pressed deeper into my bones. It curled inside my jacket, settled along my spine, stiffening my fingers. I could smell frost, damp wood, and something sharper. Metal or maybe iron in the snow. An unseen presence pressed closer. I could feel it before I saw it. Heavy in the air, patient, hovering just beyond sight. Not moving, but somehow alive. I took a careful step. The snow underfoot was soft yet unyielding, holding me in place as if reluctant to let me pass. Each step echoed faintly, swallowed quickly by the frozen silence. The shadows twitched again. Subtle, deliberate. Closer now, pressing against the corners of my vision, curling through the fog that lingered at ground level. It was there, in every shimmer of gray, in every pulse of cold against my skin. I held my breath. Even that felt loud. The frozen wisps of air hung between my lips, glittering like fractured glass. And I knew something was moving with them. A branch creaked high above, small, almost polite. But it made the stillness heavier. The presence seemed to press harder, filling the spaces the sound created, turning air into weight. I shivered. Not from cold alone. Something pressed against the back of my neck, brushing the hair along my scalp, insistent, silent. The fog thickened. It curled around my arms, along my coat, into my hair. It smelled of wet pine, of snow, and something I could not name, something that clung and waited. I tried to see. Shadows stretched unnaturally, twisting along the trees, leaning toward me, then recoiling. Every shadow felt alive, aware, patient. I moved slowly. One step, then another. The frozen breaths fell from my mouth, lingering, glittering, unyielding, and with them, I could feel it. Watching, pressing closer, patient. The forest seemed to breathe with me. Every inhale of frozen air, every exhale of snow-laden mist, shared with whatever lingered unseen. I could smell it now, sharper, metallic, curling through the frozen fog like smoke. I stopped. The shadows paused, twitching lightly. The presence did not retreat, nor advance. It waited, and I could not look away. The snow glinted in pale light. Each frozen breath hovered, suspended like fragile glass. Even my heartbeat seemed visible, hammering in sync with the cold stillness. I stepped forward again. Soft, careful. The snow pressed beneath my boots, soft yet firm, resisting and holding me. The fog moved with me, curling around my ankles, trailing along my arms. I realized then that I was utterly alone, yet not alone. The presence remained, patient, constant, invisible yet undeniable. I took a deep breath. It froze, hung in the air, and I felt it again, close, waiting, alive in the cold. I moved slowly through the forest. Step by step, frozen breath suspended, shadows twitching at the edge of my vision. And I knew the presence would follow. Always. The forest was heavy with frost. Snow clung to every branch, every needle, soft and muffled underfoot. The air was sharp and cold, biting at my cheeks and nose, curling in my lungs. Then it came, a long, mournful howl. It pierced the stillness like ice cracking across a frozen lake. The sound rolled through the pines, bounced off the trunks, weaving through the fog. It vibrated in my chest, making each heartbeat louder, sharper. Shadows stretched toward me, not from the light, not from my movement. They leaned, twisted, reaching like thin black fingers along the snow. I stopped. The fog pressed closer, curling around my ankles, settling in my hair. The cold smelled sharper now, metallic, like frost biting through iron. Something watched me from the tree line. I could feel it before I saw it. Patient, silent, waiting. I tried to focus. Branches shifted lightly, but I could see nothing definite. Only darkness between the trunks, eyes. Maybe. Just shadows. The howl rose again. Longer, deeper, echoing endlessly. It made the snow tremble beneath my boots. My breath came in shallow clouds. They froze before me, suspended in the air. The hum of the forest pressed in, thick and low, vibrating along the snow. I moved. Slow steps, soft footsteps against the frozen ground. The shadows leaned closer. The fog curled higher, brushing my coat and hair. Every direction looked the same. Tall trees, pale fog, snow endless beneath them. And it watched. From somewhere just beyond the edge of my vision, the howl broke again. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. From above, behind, and deep in the tree line where the fog swallowed everything, I could feel the presence. Not just watching, but leaning toward me. The air grew heavier, denser, carrying the smell of wet pine, frost, and something faintly metallic. Shadows twisted unnaturally along the snow. Branches creaked without wind. The forest seemed alive, bending slightly, leaning inward, converging toward the path I walked. I froze again. The fog settled around me like a cage, and I knew something waited just beyond it. Another step, soft, careful. The snow resisted, packed and cold, clinging to my boots. The shadows stretched further, twitching in ways that defied the light. I could see it now. A figure? Maybe just a shape. It lingered at the edge of the tree line. Too still, too patient. Watching me, the howl rose once more. Closer now, yet distant. It shook the forest with its grief, echoing off the pines and through the fog. I felt it brush the back of my neck, cold, light, insistent. The presence was not here, not tangible, but impossible to ignore. I moved again, each step muffled by snow, each heartbeat loud in the silence between howls. The shadows stretched along my path. The fog curled around my ankles and wrists. I glanced back. Nothing. Only twisted trees and pale fog. Yet I could feel it. The watching, waiting, silent. The howl faded, leaving only the hum of the forest beneath the frost. But the shadows remained. Leaning, twisting, patient. I stopped. The cold pressed into my skin. The snow shimmered in pale light. And the figure, or shadow, still lingered at the edge of the tree line. I whispered my own name. It carried in the fog. The forest seemed to hum with it. I took a slow step forward. The shadows shifted in response. The presence pressed closer. And I knew the forest had woken for me. The howl would return. I could feel it. And so would it. Watching, always. The snow lay thick, white, and endless. The forest pressed close, tall pines bending slightly under frost. My breath rose in pale clouds, hanging briefly before fading into the cold. Then I heard it. Footsteps, heavy, slow, echoing across the snow. I froze. The snow around me remained untouched. No footprints, nothing to mark their passing. The steps continued, circling, coming closer from nowhere, then fading, then returning. I could feel the weight of them, not pressing down physically, but on my chest, inside my skull. A pressure that made my heart beat loud, uneven. The fog had thickened. It curled along the snow, brushing my boots and sleeves. It smelled of frost, pine, and something sharper, like metal just beyond reach. I moved cautiously. Each step sank slightly, muffled beneath the snow. The footsteps shifted in response. Always out of sync, always near, yet impossible to trace. Shadows stretched along the trees. They twisted unnaturally, leaning toward me, then recoiling. I could feel them brushing at the edges of my vision. The steps circled again. Closer this time! I turned quickly, heart thumping, and the snow remained empty. I whispered my own name. It echoed softly, swallowed immediately by the fog. The footsteps responded. A shift in rhythm, heavier now, deliberate. Panic pressed into my chest. I wanted to run, but the snow held me, soft and unyielding. Every direction looked the same. Pines, fog, white silence. And somewhere in it, the footsteps moved, patient and unseen. I tried to focus. The snow glinted in pale light, untouched and pristine. Yet the sound of heavy steps layered over it, circling, closing in. Branches creaked high above, or maybe low, brushing against the fog. I could not tell. The forest felt alive, bending and shifting with every heartbeat, every breath. I held still. The footsteps slowed, paused. I could feel them in the space around me, pressing, waiting, patient. The fog curled around my ankles. The cold bit through my gloves, through my coat, sharp and insistent. I could smell frost and wet pine, metallic in the back of my throat. The steps began again, closer, heavier. A circle tightening, a presence surrounding me. I turned slowly, scanning the trees. Nothing moved. Yet I felt it there, watching, waiting, patient. The footsteps shifted again, passing behind, then ahead. I could sense them more than hear them now. A weight in the snowless spaces pressing into the air. I took a careful step forward. The snow resisted softly beneath my boots. The fog followed, curling along my legs, rising just enough to brush my coat. And then silence. Only my breath, sharp and frozen, hovering in the cold air. The footsteps had vanished. Yet I knew they were not gone. I moved slowly, cautiously, scanning each shadow, each drift of fog. The forest seemed to lean closer. The pines watched with silent, frozen patience. Every direction looked the same. The snow remained untouched. And somewhere, just beyond sight, the heavy steps circled, patient, unseen. I whispered again. Nothing answered. Only the forest, only the cold. I walked, soft, careful, every sense alert. The footsteps would return. I could feel them, waiting, always. The path I had known felt familiar, the snow soft beneath my boots. I traced it carefully, each step deliberate. The forest smelled of frost, damp pine, and something metallic, sharp in the back of my throat. And then it vanished. The trail I had been following simply disappeared. Snow stretched endlessly, undisturbed, as if no one had ever walked there. Trees shifted in the fog. Their trunks bent subtly, branches curling in unfamiliar angles. A landscape I thought I knew became strange, alien. My own path felt wrong. Snow clung to my boots, cold and heavy. Yet the direction I had been walking no longer made sense. Every landmark was slightly off. I tried to retrace my steps. The fog thickened, curling around my legs, brushing my sleeves. Shadows shifted at the edge of vision, fleeting, impossible to hold. Each step made my heart beat louder. The forest hummed beneath the frost, vibrating softly, insistent. I felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing from all sides. I stopped. The silence was thick, almost tactile. Even the crunch of snow seemed muted. I moved again, cautiously, carefully, each step testing the air, the snow, the unseen paths. Nothing answered. The forest held me. Every tree, every shadow patient, waiting. Shadows flitted just beyond my vision. Every glance revealed only empty air. Yet I felt them, twisting, circling, impossible to name. My breathing quickened. Frost curled in my lungs, cold and biting. The forest seemed to lean closer, every branch and trunk stretching toward me. I could sense the presence stalking me. Patient, silent, unseen. It shifted with the fog, moving in spaces I could not measure. I turned slowly. Branches creaked softly above, wet snow sliding without sound. The shadows retreated, then reformed, dancing along the edges of the mist. The air smelled sharp, metallic, with hints of pine and wet earth. Cold pressed against my skin, biting through gloves and coat. Every step I took echoed too loudly, yet was swallowed immediately. I paused. The forest seemed alive, bending, whispering in the shifting fog. The shadows moved again, impossibly fast, impossibly close. I felt them press against the edges of perception. Breath, fog, and frost intertwined, and I walked, slowly, carefully, aware of every rustle, every shift. The lake lay glassy and smooth. Ice reflected nothing, neither the pines nor me. It shimmered pale, unbroken, endless. Cracks formed slowly across its surface, jagged, precise. Yet nothing fell through, nothing broke beneath. Something moved beneath the ice. I could feel it, a subtle vibration, alive and patient. The air smelled of frozen water, pine, and something heavier, metallic. I stepped closer. The frost crunched lightly beneath my boots. The ice reflected nothing, yet I felt myself staring into eyes unseen. A shiver ran up my spine. The fog drifted across the lake, curling along the surface like fingers. And whatever waited beneath moved, subtle, deliberate, impossible to touch. I froze. The hum of the forest pulsed faintly through my bones. The ice held its silence, endless, patient. I stepped back. Breath frozen in the cold air, and the lake watched. Fog swirled around me. And then it appeared. A creature, unnaturally tall. Limbs stretched beyond belief. Its head tilted, observing, patient, silent. I froze. I couldn't tell if it moved. Every instinct urged flight, yet awe held me rooted. The snow whispered beneath my boots. Branches leaned slightly, bowing to the presence. The cold bit harder now, piercing through layers. Its gaze was patient, silent, alive. I could feel it pressing against the edges of thought, curiosity, fear. The fog thickened. It moved with the creature, curling, shaping the air around it. I stepped back, and it remained, unmoving, watching, endless. Chapter 13. Humming between the pines. 750 words. A low, melodic hum vibrated through the pines. The fog pulsed with it, wrapping around me. It grew, rhythmic, almost sentient. Branches swayed, but no wind moved them. The snow pressed beneath my boots, soft yet resistant. Every breath caught in the air, glittering frost suspended before me. The hum sank into my chest, a vibration that threaded through the trees, the fog, the forest floor. I could feel it everywhere, patient, watching, enveloping. Shadows twisted along the snow. They moved in rhythm, subtle, deliberate. The hum deepened, pressing into bones, into thought, into sleepless awareness. Faint cries drifted through the fog. Soft, broken. They came from a hollow in the forest just beyond the trees. I stepped closer. Snow crunched beneath my boots, but the sound was swallowed quickly by the cold, muted air. The fog curled around my legs, brushing my coat, reaching toward me with unseen fingers. The cries grew sharper, more urgent. Yet each step I took made them harder to follow, as if they shifted with my movement. Branches scraped lightly above, bending without wind. The hollow yawned ahead, dark and deep. The air smelled of damp pine and frost, sharp and metallic at the edges. I could feel my heartbeat echoing in my chest, loud, insistent, out of place in the stillness. I paused at the edge. The cries seemed to circle me now, wrapping around my ears, moving through the fog like a slow, deliberate current. I leaned closer, trying to see, but the hollow remained empty. The sound stopped. Instantly. The forest exhaled into silence, leaving only the ringing hum of absence. I took a careful step forward. Branches brushed my arms. Snow pressed under my boots. The hollow waited, patient, silent, unchanged. I whispered, but no answer came. Only frost, only fog, only the echo of something that had never been truly there. The forest held its breath, and I realized the emptiness was alive. I noticed the footprints first. They were behind me. Perfectly formed deep in the snow, I had walked alone. No one had followed. Yet the prints matched every step I had taken. I glanced away for a moment. When I looked back, they had shifted slightly, closer, more deliberate. The forest held its breath. Branches leaned in, fog curling at my ankles, wrapping around my coat. The air smelled of wet pine and frost, metallic in the back of my throat. I stepped forward slowly. Each movement made the footprints mirror me, always matching, always patient. The snow seemed to resist my boots, soft but unyielding, holding me in place. Shadows stretched along the trees. They twisted unnaturally, leaning toward me, then recoiling, retreating into the fog. Every step I took made the forest feel heavier, alive with unseen observation. I stopped. The prints waited, frozen yet moving, impossible to understand. Every sense screamed caution, yet curiosity pressed me onward. I moved again. Soft, deliberate, boots sinking slightly in the cold snow. The footprints followed, shifting slightly each time I looked away. I could feel the presence behind me. Not human, not tangible, patient, silent, watching. The fog thickened. Shadows curled around my legs, twisting with the snow. The forest hummed faintly, a low vibration pressing through my bones. I paused again, footprints unmoving, yet I could sense them breathing, patient, deliberate. I whispered my own name. The snow swallowed it. The fog answered with nothing. I stepped forward. The prints moved in unison. The forest pressed closer. And I realized I was never alone, always followed, always watched. A distant light flickered high among the branches. Pale and wavering, it danced like a heartbeat in the fog. I moved closer, careful, boots sinking softly into snow. The fog thickened around me, curling like fingers along my arms and legs. Branches leaned low, brushing my coat, reaching with unseen patience. The cold pressed sharper now, biting through gloves and jacket. Shadows converged, twisting along the trees. They seemed to bend the fog, stretch toward the light, then recoil. The light blinked, a single pulse of warmth against the pale gray. I stepped forward slowly. Every movement shifted the fog, curling it higher, wrapping tighter. The shadows moved with it, patient, deliberate, waiting. The light died. Instantly. The pale glow vanished, leaving only frost, fog, and the leaning shadows. The forest held its breath. Branches creaked softly, snow sliding silently from unseen limbs. The cold felt alive, pressing against my skin and into my chest. I paused. Every sense stretched taut. The fog swirled, twisting around me, hiding movement I could not see. The forest was patient. The shadows lingered. The light would not return, and I realized slowly, quietly, that I was alone. But watched. Cold air brushed the back of my neck. A shiver ran down my spine, sharp and sudden. I exhaled and froze. Another breath mirrored mine, hanging in the pale fog, suspended like frost in mid-air. Not mine, I swallowed. The forest seemed to lean closer, every branch bending slightly, shadows stretching, reaching. The air smelled of frost, wet pine, and something metallic, faint, unplaceable. I stepped forward slowly. Each boot pressed into snow that resisted, soft yet unyielding. The mirrored breath followed, drifting beside mine, moving with me. I held my arms close, shoulders tight. My heartbeat roared in my ears. Every nerve stretched taut, alert to subtle movements in the fog. The forest was alive. Not wind, not snow, something patient watching. I could feel it pressing from the edges of my vision, lingering in the spaces between trees. I glanced behind. Nothing. Only snow and fog. Only my mirrored breath, hovering, silent. The fog twisted around me, curling over boots and hands, brushing hair across my cheeks. The mirrored breath pulsed, shifting always with me, patient, deliberate. I whispered softly, my own name. The forest swallowed it immediately. The mirrored breath shivered as if responding, yet made no sound. I tried to move faster. Each step was mirrored, precise. It matched my rhythm perfectly, never faltering, always present. Shadows leaned, twisted along trunks. Branches creaked faintly above, brushing snow down without wind. I felt the presence tighten, pressing closer, patient and silent. I stopped. My own breath hissed in the cold air. The mirrored breath hovered still beside mine, and I realized it would not leave. It was patient, silent, always near. I took a careful step forward. The mirrored breath moved with me, following, impossible to escape. The fog curled tighter, twisting along arms and boots, binding the path ahead. Every instinct screamed to run, every sense warned. Yet I could not escape the mirrored presence. It pressed, soft but undeniable, a quiet weight in the pale fog. The forest hummed faintly beneath the frost, the sound vibrating through my bones. I whispered again. Nothing answered. Only the mirrored breath, patient and still, drifting beside mine, alive. I walked slowly, careful, aware of every rustle, every shift in shadow, every brush of cold against my skin. The mirrored breath never faltered, never moved ahead, never lagged behind. It was patient. It was silent. And I knew, deep in the marrow of my bones, it was not mine. Always. Fresh snow had erased everything I knew. The paths I had walked countless times were gone. Soft, white, endless. I stepped forward cautiously. Each foot sank slightly into the snow, muffled and cold. The fog hugged the ground, curling around my boots and ankles like fingers. Every landmark was distorted. Trees, I remembered, bent differently. Trunks twisted, branches reaching in directions they never had before. Rocks and stumps appeared unfamiliar, shapes unfamiliar beneath the snow. I stopped. The forest seemed larger, endless. A pale light glimmered through the fog, distant, uncertain. I tried to move toward it, but the snow pressed against me, slow and unyielding. Each step echoed softly, swallowed immediately by the hush of frost and fog. The air smelled sharp, of cold pine and wet snow, tinged with something metallic I couldn't place. My breath rose in frozen clouds, heavy in the stillness. I turned in a slow circle. Nothing looked familiar. The paths I had trusted were gone, replaced with a labyrinth of white and fog. Shadows leaned from the trees. They twisted subtly, impossibly, curling into the snow like the forest itself was shifting. The sense of being trapped pressed into my chest, cold and insistent. I tried to retrace my steps. The snow resisted. Branches scraped lightly across my arms as if nudging me back, holding me within the whiteness. Every direction looked the same. The fog thickened, moving in slow waves, blurring the horizon. I could hear faint rustling like soft footsteps far beyond my reach, circling, patient. The air grew heavier, dense with cold and frost. I felt the forest breathing around me, patient, deliberate. I was alone, yet never alone. I took a careful step forward. The snow yielded slightly, cold pressing into boots. The fog shifted with my movement, curling around my coat and hair. I paused. A distant branch creaked. Something moved just beyond the mist, subtle, deliberate, unseen. The forest hummed faintly, soft and steady beneath the frost. Snow shimmered under pale light, undisturbed except for my path. Yet the path felt wrong. I tried another direction. The landmarks refused recognition. A rock, a tree, a hollow. Everything familiar was gone, replaced by subtle disorientation. The sense of being trapped grew heavier. Every step pressed into the cold, stretching time, stretching the fog. Shadows seemed to lean closer with each breath. I stopped again, heart tight. The silence was thick, almost physical. Every sound of my movement echoed and vanished. I whispered to the fog. It swallowed my words immediately. The snow held me, and I realized the paths I had walked were never truly mine. They had been erased, swallowed. The forest waited, patient and quiet. I moved slowly, carefully, boots pressing into soft, unyielding snow. Fog curled along my legs, brushing against my coat. Every sense alert, every nerve taut. The forest remembered me. It held me, and I knew there was no leaving until it chose. The wind moved differently here. Not gusting, not bending branches. It carried whispers, soft, almost delicate, circling my ears. It called my name, or something like it. Impossible to tell if I heard correctly or if the forest was shaping the sound itself. Fog wrapped around my legs, curling and drifting like smoke. The snow beneath my boots was soft, cold, muffling each step. The air smelled of wet pine, frost, and a faint metallic tang that pressed at my throat. I stopped, listening. The whispers shifted, closer, further, like shadows sliding across the snow. Every glance into the fog revealed nothing, yet I felt eyes, patient, deliberate. I stepped forward slowly. Boots pressed into the snow, cold creeping through socks and gloves. The whispers followed, faint and circular, brushing past, never landing. Branches bent overhead, heavy with frost, scraping softly, almost like punctuation to the murmurs. The fog thickened, curling around my coat, twisting into the gaps between the trees. The forest hummed softly beneath the frost, subtle and constant. I moved again. The whispers circled me, teasing, patient. Every step I took felt wrong, though nothing looked different. I stopped. My own breath hung frozen in the air, mirrored by something unseen. The whispers paused. A silence more alive than the snow itself pressed in, cold and watchful. I tried to continue. The wind shifted. A faint brush against my neck made me shiver. The whispers resumed, patient, insistent, circling. Every direction looked the same. Fog, snow, shadows. The forest alive, holding me, guiding, waiting. I whispered back softly. Nothing answered. The wind carried the echoes away. The whispers circled again. I walked carefully, boots pressing into snow, fog curling along my legs. The forest breathed around me, and I knew quietly that the wind would not let me leave. It had learned my name. It followed. It remembered. A deep snowdrift shifted slightly. Soft, subtle, almost alive. I stepped closer, boots sinking lightly into the cold snow. Something moved beneath it. I froze, breath catching in the frosty air. The snow hummed softly under my weight, holding the secret just out of reach. I leaned closer. The snow collapsed suddenly. Empty. Nothing remained, just white, undisturbed, frozen silence. The hollow air pressed against my cheeks, sharp and metallic in scent. I stepped back slowly. Shadows curled at the edge of vision, stretching along the snow. The fog wrapped tighter around my legs, curling like slow, patient fingers. Branches scraped softly overhead. The forest hummed beneath frost, vibrating faintly in a way that pressed into my bones. Something watched from just beyond the drift, patient, unmoving, unseen. I tried to peer through the fog. Nothing. Only the drift, soft and white, and the impossible shifting of shadows at the edges of perception. I stepped closer again. The snow resisted slightly, cold pressing against my boots, firm yet soft. A faint movement rippled beneath the surface, subtle, deliberate. I froze. Breath hung in frozen clouds before me. The forest pressed in. Fog curling, branches leaning, shadows twisting. The snowdrift remained empty. Yet the sense of presence lingered, patient, deliberate, waiting. I moved carefully. Every step pressed into the cold, into the soft, resisting snow. Shadows moved in tandem, subtle, deliberate, like the forest itself breathed around me. I whispered softly into the fog. It swallowed my words immediately. The drift shifted slightly, then stillness returned. I stepped back again. The shadows receded just enough to let me move. The snow held its silence. The forest waited, patient, silent. And I realized I would not understand what hid beneath the drift. I walked on slowly, careful, every sense alert, every nerve taut. And the drift, and the shadows, and the fog. They followed. A massive tree stood before me, hollow at its base. Darkness gaped like a mouth beneath frost-covered bark. I approached slowly. Snow whispered beneath my boots, soft, muffled, almost inaudible. Fog curled around my legs, reaching like pale fingers, wrapping into the hollow's mouth. A faint rustling echoed from inside. Soft, deliberate. Not wind, not snow. Something moving. I stopped. Heart tight, pulse rising quietly. The air smelled damp and earthy, mixed with frost. metallic faintness lingering behind my nose. I leaned closer. The rustling paused, then began again. Soft footsteps, just beyond reach, circling inside the hollow. The tree loomed. Its shadow stretched unnaturally, curling along the snow. Branches bent low, brushing my coat, whispering faintly against my ears. I wanted to step back. I wanted to run. But the snow pressed stubborn beneath my boots, holding me in place. I whispered softly, unsure if I intended an answer or simply to fill the silence. The hollow swallowed my voice. Only the faint rustle returned, patient, deliberate. I circled the base slowly. Every side seemed identical, black gaping mouth, frost glinting on bark. No escape, no clarity, just presence, waiting. The fog thickened. It pressed against my cheeks, curling into my hair, chilling my skin beneath coat and gloves. Every sense screamed caution. I leaned closer again. Rustling shifted slightly, responding or perhaps initiating movement unseen. Shadows inside the hollow stretched and twisted, impossible shapes pressing at the edge of perception. The air hummed faintly beneath frost. Cold pressed through every layer of clothing. The forest held its breath with me, patient, silent, waiting. I paused. A soft exhale of my own fogged the air. The hollow seemed to inhale in return. Deliberate, slow, deliberate. I stepped back cautiously. The rustling stopped. Yet I knew it was still there. Patient, unseen, watching. The snow around me held every footprint, soft yet firm, frozen in time. Every branch above seemed to lean in, whispering against the fog. The hollow remained dark, impossible to penetrate, alive in its silence. I took another step. The forest seemed to stretch, twisting space, bending perception. Shadows curled along the tree, reaching, patient. I whispered again. Nothing answered. The hollow waited, and I realized the forest had chosen this tree as a sentinel. I moved slowly, carefully, boots pressing into snow, fog curling around my legs. The hollow followed me with its silence. Patient, watching. And I knew the moment I left, it would remain, waiting for the next step into its darkness. Fog pressed heavily against my face. Every breath tasted of frost and wet pine. I could barely see a few feet ahead, then I noticed them. Eyes, pale, unblinking, appearing suddenly in the fog. They multiplied. 1, 2, 3, dozens, watching from all directions. Slow, deliberate, inhuman, I froze. Snow crunched faintly beneath my boots, every step amplified in the cold silence. Branches bent, brushing against my shoulders and hair. The air smelled metallic, sharp, pressing against my throat. I blinked. The eyes were still there. They shifted slightly, always in my peripheral vision, never fully facing me. I whispered softly, but the fog swallowed the words. No response. Only the steady, patient watching. I stepped cautiously forward. The snow resisted slightly under my boots, cold pressing into my feet. Every movement was mirrored in shadow, though the shadows held no form, only extension. The eyes blinked together. Slow, unnatural. It made the forest feel smaller, tighter, like it had contracted around me. I turned, slowly, trying to face each direction. They were everywhere. Above, below, between the trees, hiding yet patient. I could feel the presence behind them. Something older, deliberate, waiting. The fog swirled around my legs, wrapping like soft fingers, curling into every gap of the snow. I whispered again. The fog hummed faintly in response. The eyes did not falter. They only watched, slow and steady, pressing into my vision, into my mind. I took another step. Boots sank slightly, snow soft and unyielding. The eyes followed, unblinking, patient, deliberate. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the tree trunks, curling toward the fog. Branches bent, scraping lightly, brushing cold against my arms. The forest hummed faintly beneath frost, vibrating through my bones. I tried to step back. The snow held me. Every direction felt wrong, but the eyes remained, watching, patient. I whispered my own name. Nothing answered. Only the fog and the eyes and the weight of their observation pressing in. The fog shifted. The eyes blinked in unison, slow, deliberate, inhuman. I realized they were not just watching. They were waiting. I moved carefully, step by step. The fog curling, snow pressing cold against my boots. Every sense stretched taut, every nerve alert. The eyes remained, patient, unblinking, all around me, and I knew I would not escape their gaze. Not in this fog, not in this forest. The forest had gone quiet, too quiet. Even the snow seemed to hold its breath beneath my boots. Every step echoed faintly, swallowed instantly by the frozen air. I could feel the fog curling at my ankles, wrapping around my coat, brushing against my gloves. The scent of frost and wet pine pressed sharp against my nose. I tried to call out softly. My own words vanished into the stillness. No answer, no sound. The silence was heavier than snow. It pressed against my chest, filled my ears, settled into my bones. Even my own heartbeat seemed muted, swallowed by the frozen hush. I moved slowly, each step deliberate. Snow resisted softly underfoot, cold pressing into boots. Branches scraped faintly above, though no wind stirred them. The fog thickened. It clung to trees and rocks, wrapping around me like a slow, deliberate hand. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the snow, curling, twisting. I stopped. The silence pressed closer. I could almost feel it moving, patient, deliberate, waiting. I whispered my own name. No response. Only the frozen hush, holding everything in place, watching. Every familiar landmark was distorted. The forest felt smaller, tighter, yet endless. The snow beneath me reflected pale light, soft and muted, giving nothing away. I took another careful step. Footprints sank softly, then seemed to fade, swallowed by frost and fog. Every movement stretched the silence like the forest itself was breathing around me. Branches creaked faintly, just enough to remind me I was not completely alone. But the sound was swallowed instantly by the snow, leaving nothing but the hush. I could feel eyes pressing from beyond the fog, patient, deliberate, unseen. I paused, breath rising in frozen clouds. Every nerve taut, every sense alert. The silence grew heavier still. It was alive, watching, waiting. I moved again. Slow, deliberate, boots pressing into the soft, unyielding snow. Fog curling tighter with every step, shadows stretching along the edges of perception. The forest held its breath. Even the wind seemed gone, leaving only frost and fog. Silence pressing in like a living thing. I whispered once more. Nothing answered. The silence remained, patient, eternal, freezing everything around me, and I realized I was alone. Yet never alone. The forest had waited for this moment, and it would not let me leave. Beyond the trees, I saw it. A shape, tall, gaunt, motionless. The snow pressed cold beneath my boots. Fog curled at my ankles, reaching like slow fingers. Breath rose in frozen clouds, hanging in the air, visible and heavy. I froze. The shape did not move. Yet the forest shifted, patient, deliberate, bending around it. Branches leaned closer. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the snow, twisting with the fog. The air smelled of frost and pine, metallic faintness lurking behind each inhale. I tried to step backward. Snow resisted slightly, soft but unyielding. The shape did not flinch, did not acknowledge. It waited. My heart thumped, muted by cold fog and the hush of the forest. Each footfall echoed faintly, swallowed instantly. Shadows leaned toward me, patient, deliberate. I whispered softly. The fog swallowed my words. The shape remained, silent, still, watching. Every instinct screamed to move faster. But the snow pressed beneath my boots, slowing, soft, deliberate. The forest hummed faintly beneath frost, vibrating through my bones. I stepped carefully. The shape did not change. Every nerve stretched taut, every sense alert to impossibly subtle movements. Branches scraped softly above, brushing snow down onto my coat and gloves. The fog twisted and curled at my legs, holding me in place. Shadows leaned and receded, patient, deliberate. I exhaled slowly. My own breath hung frozen, mirrored by something unseen in the fog. The shape did not shift. It waited. I tried to walk around it. Every direction felt wrong. The snow resisted. The fog tightened. And the shape remained, patient, observing, impossible to ignore. I paused, heart tight. Every sense screamed warning. The forest held its breath with me. The fog pressed. Shadows stretched, and I realized I could not leave. Not while it waited. Not while the forest held me in the hush of frost and fog. I moved slowly, careful, boots pressing into the soft, unyielding snow. The shape did not move. It waited, patient, silent, eternal. The forest waited. I knew it had waited. Every step I took felt heavier, pressing into snow that seemed softer yet more deliberate than before. I retraced my path, following the ghost of trails I thought I remembered. The fog hung low, curling around my legs, threading through trees and under branches like slow living fingers. Each exhale rose in frozen clouds, visible, fleeting, fading into nothing. Everything looked the same, yet different. The hollow where I had first entered, where curiosity had led me, stood silent, unchanged. But the snow around it shimmered oddly, frost bending in subtle patterns that made my boots sink deeper. I stopped. The silence was thick, heavier than any I had walked through before. Not the quiet of snow falling or wind lost in pine. This silence had weight. It pressed against my ears, my chest, filling every empty space with its patient, cold presence. I whispered into the fog. My words returned to me, distorted, stretched, faint echoes I did not recognize. It was a voice like mine, yet wrong. Familiar but subtly different. I shivered. The hollow gaped, dark and inviting. I felt its pull, subtle, insistent, tugging at my boots, my coat, my very breath. Shadows clung to the edges of the trees, long stretched, bending toward me. They were patient. They were deliberate. I stepped closer. The snow compressed underfoot, cold pressing through socks and gloves. Branches scraped lightly across my shoulders, brushing frost into my hair. I inhaled slowly, the metallic tang of cold air biting at my nose. I reached the hollow. Its darkness seemed deeper now, thicker. Not merely absence of light, but a living, patient void. I peered inside, expecting something. Nothing. The hollow held only its silence, waiting, patient, deliberate. I turned slightly. The fog shifted. Shadows curled at the edges of my vision, moving independently of the trees. Something unseen pressed closer, brushing against the air around my boots, my coat. I could feel its weight. I could feel its patience, I whispered again. My own name. The hollow swallowed it instantly. A faint echo returned, slow, stretched, alien. I froze. The forest seemed to pulse in response, subtle vibrations beneath snow and frost. Branches bent, brushing faintly against one another, scratching the hush into my ears. Shadows leaned closer, pressing into the fog, curling around my legs. I moved carefully, but the snow resisted. Every step felt deliberate, measured, as if the forest guided me back to this place. The hollow waited. I felt it watching from the darkness, from the fog, from the snow itself. Something familiar yet wrong followed me. A whisper I had heard before, but not my own. It drifted just behind, never overtaking, patient, deliberate. I took another step forward. The hollow seemed to expand, swallowing light, pulling the fog into itself. Shadows stretched along the trunks of nearby trees, bending unnaturally, twisting into impossible shapes. The silence pressed harder. Even the faint rustling of snow beneath my boots seemed muted, absorbed by the weight of waiting. I tried to remember the path I had first taken, the way in. Everything looked unchanged, yet nothing felt right. Snow and fog had rewritten the landscape. Even my footprints seemed to disappear, swallowed immediately by the soft, patient frost. I whispered softly, my breath mingling with the fog. "Who's there?" No answer. Only the hollow, patient, unmoving, waiting. I circled the hollow slowly. Branches scraped faintly above, rustling snow down onto my coat. The air smelled of frost and pine, tinged faintly with the metallic hint that had followed me through every chapter of the forest. Shadows curled along the edges of my vision, moving independently of light, stretching toward the hollow, then recoiling. I stopped again. I could feel the presence more strongly now. Not just around me, but in the very air, the fog, the snow. Patient, deliberate. watching. A faint whisper brushed the back of my neck. I froze, breath suspended in the cold air. It mimicked me, quiet and soft. A reflection of my own fear, stretched, deliberate, almost sentient. I moved closer to the hollow's mouth. Darkness pressed back, curling around my hands as I reached for the edge. Snow swirled at my boots. Shadows shifted in tandem, stretching long and thin, weaving into the fog. I could feel the forest remembering. Every step, every sound, every breath had been noted. The hollow pulsed softly, patient, deliberate. It had waited for this moment, I whispered once more. My voice quivered, carried faintly through the fog. The forest answered, not with words, but with subtle shifts, rustling branches, curling shadows, soft scraping against snow. I was reminded I was not alone. Never had been. The hollow seemed to inhale. I felt it in the air, the fog, the snow beneath my boots. Shadows pressed closer. The patient weight of waiting pressed against my chest. I exhaled slowly. Breath rose in frozen clouds. The whispers followed. Familiar. Wrong. Patient. I stepped back. The hollow remained. Dark, unmoving, patient. The forest held its breath, and I realized, no matter how far I had walked, no matter how many paths I had traced, I had returned exactly where I had begun. The hollow had waited for me. The whispers had followed me. The forest had remembered. I moved slowly, carefully, boots pressing into snow, fog curling at my legs, shadows stretching along the edges. Every sense alert, every nerve taut, patient, deliberate, waiting, the hollow, the whispers, the fog, the forest. They would remain, and I would remain within them, silent, cold, watched forever.